Hello and welcome to Fast Forward EVs. Today is a bit of a tangent from our usual content. I'm going to be taking a beautiful fall drive up to Mount Vernon, Ohio to pick up some new hand-built electronics for retro computing. As you can see, it really is a lovely fall day. What's this about retro computing, you ask? Well, it's one of my earlier hobbies before I got into the electrification of mobility and EV craze. Most of my attention was spent on using computers, mostly old ones, for hobbyist and restoration and preservation um, purposes. Although I was of age in the 80s, I missed out on a lot of the 80s early computer stuff, especially the 8-bit era. And it wasn't till the later 80s, mid to late 80s, that I had my own computers, and those were Intel based, the IBM PC compatibles, and then I fell into the clutches of the Amiga when it came out. The most amazing computers ever made. And then eventually switched to Mac when they went to OS 10 and became technologically interesting. But I still have a pretty good collection of old 80s computers and old 90s computers, 8 and 16-bit era computers, just gathering dust and God knows what else in the basement. And one of the most fascinating things about the retro computing hobbyist space in the current era is how many really talented people spend their time working on it. And they create new electronic designs for accessories and peripherals for that make using these old retro computers much easier. Because one of the big problems with the old computers is the storage mechanisms were flaky and analog based and mechanical, and they didn't survive very well. And so, to the degree that you could find one that works, a computer that works, you're probably unlikely to find anything to read the media that came with it, the disk drives and tape drives to read the tapes and floppy disks that are in mechanically useful condition. So when you do, you want to preserve that data and get it into a modern format. And then somehow you need to connect that modern media to the old computers. And one of the big things that happens in the retro space right now is people making the hardware to do that. So, with that a bit of explainer out of the way, what am I going to do today? Well, I'm going to meet up with a gentleman named Joe from Joe's Computer Museum. He is a purveyor of some of these boards. What he does is, you buy the blank boards from design. The design is open source, and you buy the blank boards from somebody like PCBWay, and then you populate the board yourself by soldering on all the chips and components and putting any firmware on there that it requires, and then you can sell it as a completed product to retro computer hobbyists. And that's one of the things Joe does. And when I went to order this device, which is a SCSI adapter called Blue SCSI, from his site, I noticed that he lived in Mount Vernon. Well, that's only a 30-40 minute drive from where I live. So I contacted Joe and arranged to meet him and do the pickup in person. And so I'm hoping here in 20 minutes or so I'll have my grubby paws on a Blue SCSI adapter board so I can read all of my Amiga's old SCSI drives onto modern flash media. to help preserve it. So, what's all this got to do with EVs and electrification, you might ask? Well, I think I may have said it before, but I think of the EV market right now, the past 5 8 to 5 years or so, to be like the beginnings of the personal computer market. Throughout the 70s, there were hobbyists who built their own computers, but there was no personal computer industry. And then suddenly in the 80s, it sprang up when microprocessors became affordable in quantity. Companies started making home computers. It was a new category of product, and it just really blew up super quick in the early 80s and became this giant industry, the biggest industry in the world that it is today. Started in the early 80s with those home computers. And I think of the EV market as being just like that. Now, there have been fits and starts. It probably hasn't taken off as hugely as the PC market did, but there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of different players in the market. They're all slightly different vehicles. We have issues over compatibility of charging standards and things like that. And that was a lot like the early PC industry. The Commodore computers couldn't talk to data from the Atari computers, for example. They had different ports and different storage medium and different ways of writing to that storage medium. The early EV market is a lot like that. It's starting to consolidate. We've got our new charging standard in the United States. Um, all the but within 2 years from now, all the cars will have that. And I feel it's the beginning of the PC industry all over again, and I get to participate in it in real time instead of after the fact, like I did with the PC industry. So that's the correlation for me. The reason I thought it was worth bringing it up, other than the fact that it's simply a gorgeous day for a drive. I mean, look at this. Oh, wow, covered bridge. Well, that was an unexpected adventure. The Tesla's GPS took me this way. I've never been on this road, even though it's a mere few miles from my house. Boy, just so pretty out here. I keep wanting to stop the recording so I'm not just burning up space on my camera, but it's just too lovely to stop. Every corner I go around, more beautiness. Well, I do not see my contact yet, so hang out a bit, see if they show. Okay, well, I've done my pickup. Joe wasn't particularly interested in being on the show, so I didn't film anything from him, but I did get his card and paid him for it. Blue Scuzzy 50 pin. This will enable me to plug in old internal SCSI hard drives and get the data off of them and put it on SD cards and then use the SD card to emulate the SCSI drive for the old computer. Awesome sauce. All right, time to head home.